So the first thing I was going to cover was logistics. So it's going to be brand new, right? When we used to arrive, we got to see each other and chat a little bit on the side, and that's not really going to be the case this time. So when you arrive in the meeting, there's going to be, there's actually about 30 people signed up for this training. There's going to be two trainers, Latrice and Sarah Dobson are going to be the main trainers. And then Selena's going to be doing tech support, and I think there's couple other folks too that are going to be supporting the training on and off. I'll be showing up here and there too, probably mostly when you're coaching, I'll be there coaching as well. So when we show up, it's going to be ongoing, or there's a possibility it could be on a break as well. So just quietly arrive, make sure that your microphone is off, and just wait, and the trainers will invite you to introduce yourselves when they're ready to make that transition and get started on that. So I assume they'll be able to keep track, or they might ask you again. It's a lot to juggle with 30 people, 30 odd people. So we're gonna see how that goes, and it might be hard for them to find you or figure it out. It just depends. Again, they have so many details that they're gonna be trying to track. So we're curious to how that goes. Then the trainers are gonna be setting up breakout rooms. So the groups are gonna be broken up into their foursomes. There should be a couple of fives with 30 people. There'll be seven different rooms, and then 2 of those will have 3 mediators. There could be people who are trying to, often in the training, there's folks who are just too fatigued for one reason or another, can't mediate, and they ask to be observers. So there could be a couple of observer roles. They might also be reconfiguring the groups sometimes if people are needing to take a break or not be there, or, anything could kind of really happen. So we're just asking for a lot of flexibility and support during this time when this is our first time. But if things go as planned, there'll be 7 rooms, and you'll each be assigned to a room. And how many of you are brand new to being in a breakout room in Zoom? Has everyone been in a breakout room? Yes, if you've been in one? Yeah, a lot of heads nodding, okay. Anyone who has not been in one? Okay, so I'm just going to review it anyway, because when I'm training, I like to be a little bit redundant, but just to make sure, the expectation is that they're going to announce the breakout room. They'll start it, and then you'll get a little button that says, a little window that'll ask you to join. So go ahead and join. Try to track the time yourself around, and if the trainers don't say it aloud, again, because these are newer trainers and they're holding a lot of things. So put it in the chat or raise your hand or somehow ask to make sure you know what time you're coming back. And so all of you who know when you're coming back, there's usually a minute warning. So don't come back early with that warning. You can go ahead and wait the whole time, but then you will be brought back. So it could be mid-sentence, right? That's what happens sometimes. So just make sure you're tracking the time, and I'll talk a little bit more about the pace of the actual mediation role play itself, but make sure you're tracking the time, because that's part of your role as a leader there. We want to allow 15 to 20 minutes at the end to debrief. That's pretty standard. That's what we've been doing. So that's what I mean. Track your timing so that you really allow that time. It's tempting to keep going and mediating, but I think we're going to, because this is a condensed mediation class, they're only going to be in class for 30 hours, and then they're going to have 10 hours of homework. That's how we're doing it. So they'll be there from 9 till noon, and then have a 2-hour break, and they'll be there from 2 till 5. So we are having them do some homework, and if I'm remembering the agenda correctly, there's very little time for debriefing in the large group. So the debrief with you is going to be their main space. So we want to make sure that they have 15 to 20 minutes to do that. And then if you've coached before, you know that sometimes they really want you to intervene a lot, and we'll talk about intervening in a minute. But if you've intervened a lot, like, it doesn't need to be that long. Just pace yourself, but make sure you don't give them short shrift, because that's really where the learning happens, is in those conversations afterwards too. And then another thing that we wanted just to make sure that you were tracking is that there is post-training evaluations that that we're doing now. And that is basically just an email that goes to the coaches to say, how are the folks that you coached? So remember that you're going to be doing that, so that you write down their names, because sometimes coaches are like, oh, they were great, but I don't remember their names. Usually we can track that down, but it's easier if you can track it for yourself. And what we're really looking for, and it depends on if it's their first time or the final mediation, but I think you all know that there's, students sometimes just really catch on so fast, and then other people need a little bit more training and practice. And so when we are, we don't onboard everybody after the training, but we do invite people to request if they want to join. So we need some way of assessing whether they're ready or not. And we need people, at this point, we don't have any advanced training or any way to train people up. So we need them to be pretty ready to mediate in a supported way. The mediation onboarding is a observation or two, and then they join a panel of 2 other mediators. So they're part of a 3-person panel until they feel ready, and they get feedback from the other mediators that they're ready. So they don't have to be able to totally carry a mediation, but they need to be pretty good at the skills. So that's something that we really want you to help us track, so that it helps us make better decisions. The trainers are going to be tracking all that. It's going to be a lot harder for us. We're still going to be popping into the rooms to observe. Actually, I'm gonna keep adding to this document because there's some things that I want to make sure it's coherent. So you keep checking it in case we have updates later. But trainers will be coming into the rooms too to observe. And so and then also just through training, they'll have a sense of people's abilities, but it has a lot of weight what the mediator coaches say about it. And if you don't know, or you don't feel like you can assess them, that's fine. Just share that information too. So those are the main logistics pieces. I wanted to stop here and see what kind of questions people had and what thoughts were coming up for any of you. If you want to ask a question, just take off your mute and then I'll call on you. So it looked like Toby and Cedar. Toby, you were unmuted, but no question. Okay, Cedar.
Did you say trainers will be coming into the rooms? I'm just trying to imagine how it works remotely. So I understand we'll be in breakout rooms when they're practicing mediation, and then we're going to automatically come back to the shared room when the time is up.
Yeah, so thanks for asking that. So in Zoom, the trainers can actually pop in and out of the various breakout rooms. And Brigitte, maybe you can add to this because I've never done it yet, but we're going to recommend that they pop in without their on mute and also without their video. So you'll see them come in, but hopefully it doesn't distract, and they'll just quietly stay there and then they'll leave. I believe Brigitte shared that she got stuck in a room and was not able to leave. So Brigitte, did you have any other things that you could share what that might be like?
Yeah, that does happen occasionally. And when I got stuck, I just stayed there very quietly and, as you said, stayed muted and turned off my video cam so that it wasn't a distraction. I know that when we've done face-to-face versions, when you were the trainer and I was coaching, Barbara, you might sometimes add something into the coaching in the debriefing if you had noticed something as you were circulating. Do you imagine that trainers will be doing that in this format also? So if they pop into a room, they might add something to something that a coach is saying, perhaps at the end?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I think right now we're thinking no, that would be way too disruptive. So what they will be doing is they'll just be looking for gaps. Sometimes when the trainer's walking around, you can see that several rooms, something is happening in common, like maybe they're asking really directive questions and getting in that fact-finding thing, or maybe they're all getting lost in that kind of whirlpool space, or certain things you might notice is fairly common in a few of the rooms, and then they will be able to train on those back when they're convened in the larger group. So we'll try to have them carry any of those, fill in any gaps or anything that they want to highlight or emphasize. in those in between times so they don't interrupt the coaching. So that will be a little bit different. Yeah, thanks for asking that.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then I had
Anne,
another logistics. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Let's do Brigitte and then Anne.
This might be jumping ahead a little bit, but if I'm understanding correctly, the mediators and the coach are going to get put into a breakout room together, and the disputants are going to be put in a different room. And then the disputants are going to be added into the room where the mediators and the coach are. Correct?
Yeah, I think right now the plan is to mirror that where the disputants are out in the hallway in real life. And so I think there's a thought that they're going to be in their own separate room and get the prep. You're jumping ahead, but I'm going to stick with that, and then we'll get to Anne's question. What I think you should be prepared for is that to happen. And then I think that sounds pretty tricky. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to pull it off. So I think that it's really important that y'all are also prepared to prep the disputants. And so just tips around prepping the disputants. Don't interrupt. Actually, I should go back and put that in this document. I'll do that too. Just make sure they're not interrupting the opening. I don't know why, but students love to do that. In real life, I almost never had that happen. And just reminding them also to play it real and authentically, to use, especially these disputants aren't going to have a lot of time to work together. So you're going to need to let them have a little bit of time to read over what's happening. So while the mediators are prepping, the disputants could also just turn off their videos or just walk away from their computer so they could quietly read, because it's going to be a little noisy in the breakout room and there's no other way for them to take a little time to read to themselves. But then also just to use the improv rule, which whoever goes first lays it down, and then the facts, and then everyone else then the next person follows. So how long have you worked together, or how long have you lived together? Just one person makes it up, the other person goes along with it. Were you friends? Yes, no, kind of. Like the first person lays it out, the second person goes along with it. So they might not be able to figure that out together like they have in the past when they're in real life. So, but that's okay, you know.
That was sort of my point. My experience of breakout rooms is that sometimes they're a little bit finicky, and it's hard for a reason we can't determine to get someone who's been assigned to a room to get them into that room. And it takes a little bit of sort of juggling. So just wanted to sort of forewarn folks that sometimes it works beautifully, smoothly, and everybody goes where they're supposed to go. And at other times, someone gets stuck, or they can't get in, or they get in and then they get kicked out. So I do think we're going to need to be a little bit nimble around.
Yeah, and thanks for saying that. Yeah, just being as flexible as we can and just kind of rolling with what happens. And especially folks who are doing the first mediations, you're going to be helping us figure it out. And if you're one of the people coming at that like Friday afternoon, they might have some different advice for you based on what happened already. And then Selena said also, I'm still remembering you, Anne, that Selena said that the role plays will come in the mail, so you'll have a chance to look those over. Again, I think that for coaches, it's similar to actual mediators. Some people really like to have that ahead of time and really review that, and other people don't really, they just kind of deal with what is at hand. So people need different levels of preparation for that, but if you would like to read them ahead of time, they'll be sent to you. Anne, you had a question. Do you remember what it was?
My question is just logistics. Is when does the training start, and when do the role plays start, and how long will the mediations be? Oh, I guess I have that. Actually, I didn't know that.
It should be in the sign up, and then it'll probably be in the reminder. And I actually don't have the agenda, but I don't think any of them are that long. They might be 2.5 hours at the most. I think they're more like 2 hours.
Yeah,
and then
that's the one on Friday. And it's Friday, the end of the week?
Yeah, so it's Monday through Friday.
Friday, the last day.
Friday's the last day. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah, so the main coaching slots, I think, I know there was Friday morning and Friday afternoon. And I think they were Thursday morning and Thursday afternoon too, if I'm remembering correctly. Any other questions? Yeah, Sharon.
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear as to whether the disputants will be going out into a separate breakout room.
Yeah, the idea is right now, the theory is that they will be going out into a separate room and getting prepared, but there might be sort of a technical breakdown, or that might prove to be too difficult. And so it might be true that you just get all 4 of your people. And so you can just lightly coach your disputants, and I'll put some tips in this document so you can refer to those. So just prepare them a little bit and then send them on their way, maybe in their own space, have them like walk away from their computers for a few minutes while they read their role plays while you're helping the mediators prepare. So those are the 2 options. They're either going to be there from the beginning, or they are going to be prepped ahead of time. And either way, they're going to just show up when they show up. Again, in real life, you were able to go get them when you are ready. So the other thing I wanted to mention was that in all of the debriefing or the working with the mediators, I know that's always a question in real life too, that can the disputants stay there and listen? Because there's a lot of learning that happens there. And I think it's always been fine. And I think in this case, there's probably no other way. So, you'll be taking a natural break and helping the parties like usual, or helping the mediators call a break. That's one of the other things you'll be tracking. And then everyone will need a body break. And then when they come back, then the mediators will still need that halfway point planning strategic session, or checking in with each other to see how they're doing. So I would encourage you to have the parties, they can be there, but really just have them listen and observe. Sometimes parties will want to make comments and be helpful. And so really wanting them to not do that so much, because in the best of times, it's hard when a coach is giving advice and strategizing with the mediators, but it's really hard on them when the observers do that too in real life. And I think in this modality, it's going to be even harder, right? So maybe really consciously asking the disputants to be present, but to just observe while you work with the mediators, because they'll have their turn as mediators too.
Okay.
Could I just add? Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
We'll do Brigitte and then Sharon.
I was just going to add that if we do end up with disputants and mediators all in the same room right from the very beginning, the people role-playing the disputants can private chat each other to
Oh,
prep.
right. That's a good point too. Yeah.
So in the
using your
chat box, as long as they just do a private message to their other disputant, then they can negotiate, which character are you going to be? What's our backstory? So that it's invisible to the mediators.
So that kind of piggybacks on the question I have as coaches. If that's the case, how much do we have to know technically in running Zoom? I mean, if the participants don't know how to use chat, if they don't know how to get back in, how much do we have to know on how to do that?
So there will be tech support from Selena and other helpers that Selena has. So you won't have to know that much. And then I think go with what you know and with what your group knows. So if you're not as comfortable using chat, or I think that's kind of a personal choice. Like, for example, when I was going to talk about how you give them feedback, I was thinking like you could use chat to give them feedback. Personally, I find chat really distracting. And so I personally am not going to do it that way because it doesn't work for me as a coach. But if the coach is okay with it and the people are okay with it, it's probably a really fine way. Even though I don't like it that much, if the disputants wanted to use it to do some more prep, then that's fine too. So I think there's space for folks to work within your own comfort level with Zoom, and then also know that there's some technical support from seeds that can handle any larger issues.
And when you're in a breakout room, at the bottom in the black ribbon, you have an opportunity to call for help. So if
Oh,
you
right,
click on
thanks.
that, then it flags Selena and whoever else is providing technical support that there's some kind of issue, and they can pop into the breakout room and problem solve.
Great, thanks for that. Appreciate it. Any other questions before I keep going? Yeah, Anne?
How much time do you think we should leave for them if we end up having the disputants there with us and the mediators? How much time for that initial prep before the actual mediation starts?
Yeah, that's a good question. I always find that I feel as a trainer kind of rushed, like get into the mediation because you know you can prep, like it's a 45-minute prep that we usually do, right? And so it's really as quickly as you could get them to feel comfortable enough, because personally I think the practice really comes in just doing it. And but then you I'm sure you've all run into sometimes people, they're in their effort to try to feel more comfortable, want longer prep, which is understandable. I'm not sure how helpful that actually is in terms of how to spend their time. So I think it's more helpful to just dive in and just start mediating. So keeping that to, you know, as short as you can, but at the same time allowing them to cover all that they need to cover. So I usually figure about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes for their prep. Okay, I'm going to move on a little. If you have questions, then you can still ask them. The next thing in the document is just sort of the guidelines for you as small group coaches. So just reminding you what your responsibility is. So you're just really playing it probably even heavier role as a facilitator because you're going to just be alone with them. So really making sure that you own that space and that you're really welcoming them, that you're creating the structure around it, especially in the earlier ones if you're doing it on Thursday. So you're assisting them with that role play setup. You're helping them get going with their briefing and maybe guiding them on the briefing. Again, some people feel really comfortable and are natural, and other people don't really know what to talk about. So it sort of depends on who your parties are. And then obviously the suggestions and the interventions in the role play, and then creating that forum for the constructive feedback. We just have about 20 more minutes, so I want to make sure that I'm covering the feedback part too. So let me kind of move through this a little bit and save your questions for a minute or two. So again, they're going to be divided into groups, 4 or 5 people. And so at the beginning, make sure you're just introducing yourself and share and ask for pronouns, and then pay attention to what people share as their pronouns and make sure you're doing your best to use the correct pronouns. We're really wanting people to stay within their own identity. So if a person is cisgender, then we want them to continue using cisgender pronouns, which we've had some people try to use non-binary pronouns when that's not actually how they identify. We want people to stay within their own identities. So if any role player starts taking on identities that aren't really theirs, then you want to redirect that. And then again, you're going to let them know how much time, what the time frame is, asking them to sort of stay in their roles, and you're going to be discussing your style with them. So I think in this case too, unless they want more interventions, it's a little different to interrupt in this modality. It feels a little bit more disruptive, a little harsher. You know, when one person starts talking, that's why we all have our mics off, right? Because if anyone laughs or makes any noise, and when you're coaching, you're going to want to have your mic off, because even a assent will switch the focus of the microphone to you and not to them. And so it's hard to talk in an overlapping way on Zoom. People can't really talk at the same time and really hear each other. So once you start interrupting, that usually you can usually override what they're saying. But just being mindful again about how you're helping them. And I have it in here a little bit, like what the recommendation is for the intervention. So I think you could still do the third mediator one, where they might be stuck and you pop in and say, can I ask a question? And then you just help them by being a mediator and asking a question. I think that's a pretty smooth way for folks to get unstuck without really talking about it. But again, check with people and ask them how they feel about being interrupted, because I've had the whole range. I've had people who are like, no, tell me, and they want me to like intervene a lot. And then other people are just like, no, that throws me so far off, don't interrupt me. So then you want to either save it for the break or save it up and then stop, give them feedback, start again. I think, again, on Zoom, that's probably going to be the best way, is to stop once you've stopped and talk things through, you know, share a few things up before you give the feedback. So the other thing is for the interventions, places to pay attention to are if they're stuck or they're confused and they can't move forward. Try, again, interventions that allow them to stay in the role. So I think those are great places where you can just be a third mediator or a fourth, if that's the case, and ask a question. Another thing to look for, I think is important, is when there's an important moment to highlight that they missed. That's another thing that I think is important in real time to help people. So if someone like makes an apology or a new understanding or big shift, or you know how someone like does that really deep share, like that share where you as a mediator would be like, ooh, thanks for sharing that. Let's just sit with that for a second, right? And new mediators will be like, yeah, okay, so, and then they just move on. So those kinds of moments that, or a big missed opportunity where someone shares something, a real goodie, and they just breeze by it. Like any of those, and those are the times in the moment that you might want to intervene. If they're doing that kind of stuff a lot, don't intervene a lot. Then just let them muddle through and just talk about that at breaks. But those are the things where I would maybe interrupt a little bit. And then again, being aware of where they're at. Thursday being different than Friday, they might need a little help making their transitions. You know, the transitions, for any of you who haven't mediated, you know, the language changes a little. First, we're going to have you direct your communication to the mediators. Then we're going to have you direct your communication to each other, right? Because you can't tell whose people are speaking to. You can't turn them to each other. But really highlighting looping and empathy and the empathetic reflection. That empathetic reflection is just, you know, they probably need to be really reminded to do that. So those are kind of the interventions. I will take a little break here for more questions, and then I want to make sure, again, I save a little bit of time for the actual debriefing afterwards. So other questions or thoughts that are coming up for folks?
Yeah,
Jenny?
Barbara, you know, on the outline under this section, guideline for small group coaches, what, number 2, leading the initial briefing of trainee mediators, could you just briefly remind maybe at least myself what that means? And, or did you already just go through that?
That is referring to that piece, that pre-briefing that they're doing, where they're trying to figure out their styles, they're dividing up the opening, and they're talking about how they are going to work together, right? Because that's another thing when you're co-mediating on Zoom. I just encourage being open and transparent. Again, you could use chats, people have signals, but I'm really a proponent of just straight up saying, hold on, what do you think we should do right now? I'm not, you know, just like verbally being transparent, but having them talk about that and what that might look like. Or if they're not agreeing on the direction, what that might look or sound like. It's important for them to practice that a little bit. How would I interrupt you on this modem or modality, right? Because like personally, I use a lot of touch, if that's okay with people. You know, I'll touch their arm or kind of lean over and say, hold on, can we, or what do you think, you know, might turn to them. What do you think of this? And that's a little more too subtle on when you're on Zoom. You have to be more explicit, like, hey, other mediator's name. I'm wondering, you know, and using people's name a little bit more often too on Zoom. Other questions? Okay, cool. So last part is the feedback. So one thing I noticed is, and you probably have heard me say this again, broken record, you know, we can debrief mediations 10 times longer than they actually happen. So it's really important not to get caught in the narrative. of a mediation of, oh, that character was like this, like that's really fun. I love that part, but we're really here training mediators. So we want to make sure that we're highlighting mediation and mediation skills. So we like the 2 stars in a wish format. So whether you use it explicitly and directly or you keep it in mind, that you're basically trying to look at 2 things, you know, we're keeping it again within the time frame. If you did 2 things that the mediators did right and 1 thing, or, you know, did great, and 1 thing you had a wish was they would do differently next time, if everyone just answered that question, that's really almost going to fill up your 15-minute debrief. So I say that again, just to manage. And at the same time, they want feedback from you. So that's why it's a really important facilitative skill. You know, historically in real life, I've been always trying to bring groups back, and they don't come back. And they squeeze that extra 5, maybe even 10 minutes. That's not going to happen here because you're just going to be cut off. So we want to make sure that the group isn't cut off just when you were giving them the feedback, which is what they really want. So you could start by giving them really positive feedback first, and then going around and having them all do 2 stars and a wish, and then giving them more of the deltas or things that they could change or growth areas. Or you could start with them. And either way, when you start with them, it's really helpful to start with the actual mediators and have them think about, because it's really that learning that we want to ingrain in them is when people do that self-reflection. What did I do that I felt was working really, really well? And what did I do that I felt like, I couldn't figure this out, or I don't think that was the right thing to do, or that went well. So starting with the mediators helps set the tone that we're really focusing on mediator skills and the mediation skills rather than a narrative. So, you know, these are some good questions too, but again, I feel like if you're going to do 2 stars and a wish, or you're going to even do it this way, like really the debrief can also take a half an hour. So being sensitive to that and your group, and are they the kind of people who want to stumble through it and they want that practice, or are they people who love getting feedback and they want more concrete guidance, right? So really trying to feel them out with that. And you can tell that by how much time you spend, especially at the break or at other times too. So leaving that to you, but just kind of reminding you. Other mistakes that, or challenges that we've had with coaches in the past for sure is just too much negative feedback. So really remembering, I mean, you all are pretty experienced and strong. It often happens with newer coaches, but really making sure that we're strength-based. And again, I just can't emphasize enough how distressed most folks are in the current time. So going even extra easy on critical feedback. We know that actually learning happens best when we highlight the positive and what people are doing right and doing well. So that's really what we want to emphasize and what we want to focus on. That's it. You can read this for yourself. There are a couple things that came up that I'm going to add to this document, but I wanted to open it back up for questions or thoughts. Yeah, Fran.
Sorry, not quick enough with the unmute. I think you said that the main practices are going to happen on Thursday and Friday morning and afternoon. I just wanted to see, kind of know when I'm going to be a coach, how far along are they in their learning? So is it, you know, like their first mediation is Thursday
Do you remember
morning?
when you're going to be there?
I'm going to be there Thursday afternoon and Friday morning.
Okay, so if I'm remembering the agenda correctly, so one of the things we're doing a little bit differently now, so for folks who've been helping us for a while, when we teach the process, we break it up and then we let them practice a little bit. In the past, we did use coaches for that. So it was maybe only a half an hour that they were practicing because we kept breaking it up a half hour at a time, and we had coaches come for that. As it's been harder and harder to get coaches, And I found out that other people had more other ways too of doing the role play. I tried to do it without having coaches for their very first times. So that's what we're going to be doing. And it does work pretty well. In fact, when I observed it, they were better without the coaches than they were with the coach. They kind of backslid a little bit. And I think it was just because they were being observed. So basically they'll practice the opening, you know, the pre-briefing, they'll practice the opening. They'll be taught speaking to the mediators, and then they'll go into a half-hour role play on their own. So that'll be 4 people. And then they'll be taught speaking to each other, and then they'll go back into, I think, a new role play, but it's the same group, but they'll be switched, right? So everyone's going to have a little chance, and they'll start again from the opening and just the beginning, so they can all practice the beginning. There might be one other time in there where they're going to, that second group is going to get to keep going and go a little bit longer, maybe another half an hour. So they'll have practiced by the end of Wednesday, I believe they'll have practiced on their own, those tiny little bits. But probably, I think it's Thursday morning, unless there's a mediation on Wednesday afternoon that has coaches. But I think it's probably Thursday morning. It'll be their first time with coaches from the beginning to as far as they get. So, and then Thursday afternoon, by the end of Thursday afternoon, then everyone will have mediated one time. So by Friday morning, everyone will mediate at one time, and then that'll just be theirs. They only are going to have sort of 2 full mediations, I think. That's how we could squeeze into this one. So it's a little less also than anyone who's coached in the past. So I'm curious, they might not feel quite as far along on the last day as they have felt in the past. So again, that's why we want to just sort of be gentle on them. They haven't had a ton of time to practice. Other thoughts or questions? Toby, yeah.
Yeah. Are there can you just tell me the section is in the document that you've wonderfully created already? Or I'm curious if there are specific things you're looking for feedback on as we send you emails about the trainings.
Yeah, so the things that one other thing that's on this document is a model review. And that's because in the past we've had mediators, kind of like Jenny was saying, it's been a while, what is it? And so in the model review, that also is just something that kind of covers the things we are generally looking for. So I think that's kind of a guide, Toby, for what would make them feel like they're strong. But I would say, to answer that, we really want to make sure that they are more automatic in their empathetic reflection. If someone's still struggling at the end of the training around empathetic reflection, either they don't do it that much, or they're very focused on asking questions, or they're very focused on creating solutions, right? Some people have a really hard time unlearning that advising or coming up with solutions habit. So those are some things where I would say they're not quite as ready. But if folks are really good at empathizing and reflecting, they're pretty good at helping move through the process. They're sort of starting to trust the process. I think those are indications that they are pretty good at it. What kind of language? So some people really struggle over how they phrase their questions, and just using this kind of language is so different for them. Those folks sometimes aren't as ready by the end of the training. They might need more practice and more training. And then other folks either just are naturals, or they're coming into the room with a lot of experience, like Andrew, someone like Andrew, where they have their own practice in the background. So they are already walking in with those skills. So people who are able to be pretty smooth in their language and asking questions, and not even so much like how good they are at it, but it's often like how comfortable they are, right? Because a lot of folks are just not comfortable, and they're like, oh, I don't know. Was that a good question? Was that dumb? Like, they just aren't feeling smooth and confident because they really haven't had a lot of experience with it. Again, that's not a deal breaker. Some of those people are actually just great at it. They just need their confidence. And those are folks who might, by observing and being a third mediator, might be really good. If they're good, they just don't know they're good. So those are sort of some of the things that we look for. Emphasizing too, again, I said this before, but I just want to emphasize it again, like really helping them be empathetic, reflective, empathizing. You know, often folks are just very heavy in the question asking. That's not something you have to interrupt them with, but if at the breaks and at the debriefing, reminding them that they can just reflect and just leave that and see if, you know, people will tend to talk more around that. At the breaks, helping them track the issues, you know, what are the issues we've tracked so far? So those are some other things that you can highlight with them.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or considerations anyone has? All right, well then we will close up. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time. It's really fun for me to see you all here, and actually it's been a really nice distraction from such heaviness. I think we do just have a couple minutes. I always like to have a little closure, a little checkout. So maybe if you want to check out like just what's topmost on your head, even if it isn't mediation training coaching. I'm going to start with you, Sharon. Closing thought.
Well, I'm excited to participate in this new process. It's, I have a feeling that it's going to be a new way of doing things. So it's a learning process. It's exciting for me.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks for being here.
I think it's great that you have so many students that have signed up. I also think the heaviness of what's going on I know it is with me, and I think it will be with these students. So I think that's something that I'm trying to anticipate and adjust to.
Thank you. That also does remind me too that one of the things we want to remind you all as coaches, and you're all very good at this too, is tracking the power dynamics and privilege and around the different students, and making sure that folks are being held around the identities that they carry, and especially at this time that just noting some of the dynamics and how folks can treat each other to help support folks who have less sensitivity around what they might be asking. For example, folks of color at this time are wanting to start conversations with folks that they want to make sure everything's consent-based and that people are sensitive to. So we want to help the relationships too. I don't think it's actually going to come up as much in this training because people don't have a lot of informal time together, but just tracking that coming up in the mediations themselves as well. Fran, check out.
I appreciate that you did this kind of introduction for us today. I think it's helpful, and especially using the Zoom technology. It is going to be a little different, and we'll just, we'll be prepared to be light on our feet, I think. So thank you for the background and the introduction. I didn't get to introduce my cat, but you've seen my husband lurking at the
Great, thanks, Fran. Andrew.
My word is grateful. Yeah, Barbara, thanks for walking us through this. As I'm super acquainted with Zoom, but I know I'm still new to the Seeds community, and I just feel really grateful to be connected with you all, and just like having this as an outlet and a space that feels like really countercultural and important, and just like breathing in that community. So yeah, I feel really grateful for you all to be part of this.
Thanks so much. And also, yeah, just for folks who are really familiar with Zoom, any guidance you can give us after the training or during it would be welcome too, as we're trying to figure it out. Diane, you're next.
Thank you so much for doing this training and for inviting us. I am so happy to see everybody as well, and I'm super excited about participating. And I'm really just incredibly happy that you're continuing to do this outreach and train people, even though things are, you think it can't get any crazier, and now there's more and more stuff piling on. I think these things, like these trainings that you're doing, have the potential to really make a difference, and letting us continue to reach out and share and expand and extend through this platform. So thank you.
Great, thank you for participating. Jenny?
Yeah, I want to echo that. But also, actually, I don't think I've coached numerous times in the past, but this is my first training as a coach, and it's really invaluable. Thank you so much, Barbara, for sharing all of these, both your recommendations and also some requirements and expectations of seeds of your coaches. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Jenny. Toby?
I'm feeling some sweet anticipation for these students coming in. And I have a warm place in my heart for the people who raised me up in this process. And I'm remembering back to the feelings, being like, am I ready? Like, what am I going to say next? That like mental pause. And so I'm feeling excited for another group of folks to join the community and like be able to use these tools to in their lives and in this context to support our community.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
Ilona?
I am looking forward to the opportunity to be of service to these trainees and the community, and also looking forward to the experience. I've coached a few times now, and I always learn a lot, and it helps deepen my own skills as a mediator. So grateful for that opportunity too.
Awesome, thank you. Cedar?
Listening to Toby reminded me of being in class with her. And yeah, so this is a lot different on Zoom. And so whatever we can do to help people have that same kind of connection will be great.
Awesome, thank you. Selena, any closing words? Since you're back, nice to see you back with us.
Just wanted to say I'm so thankful for all of you. I just fully transparently, I was so worried. I was like, what if we don't get coaches? And I was just so humbled by all of you showing up for Seeds. And I'm just so grateful. The students are in for an absolute treat. And just so grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all so much. As you know, the coaching section is really what makes this everything come together, the role plays. And if you remember back on your coaches, it's just, we're just so excited and seeing this roster of such strong coaches for this new platform. We were really relieved and really excited. So thank you all so much. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any additional questions. I'm going to update the some of the things we talked about that aren't in that document, but you can have that to refer to. All right, thanks so much, everyone. Good evening. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.